It doesn't matter where greenhouse gases are emitted. They all go up into the same atmosphere and impact the climate. But how the climate is impacted is different everywhere around the world. So to understand how we are vulnerable, we have to look at the specific climate projections for our area. So that includes temperature projections, how hot it could get, change how we expect the precipitation patterns to change, our elevation maps and what areas are more prone to flooding than others. All these things should be looked at to help figure out what the risks are. So the risks could be a number of things, and they're all dependent on exactly where you're talking about. So sea level rise would be a concern for a coastal community, but less so for somewhere inland. Flooding and heat waves, drought, wildfire, all of these things are expected to become more likely given the general increase in temperatures and precipitation. Storms are expected to become more severe and more frequent. And as these things happen, the general overall ecosystems are changing. So the systems that we're used to relying on, our water cycle and the species that are around us, these things might start to shift. And this could have a lot of impacts. For example, ticks are moving further north than they used to be. So suddenly Lyme disease is a concern in places where it never was. We also might start to see supply chain impacts because all of these things, all of these risks, and all of these climate events are happening all around the world. And we've become reliant on a lot of products from these other places. So food security is one in particular that could become an issue because of climate change. All of these things can impact buildings and property and infrastructure, of course, but they also have human impacts. So it could be direct threats to life, or it could be mental health impacts. If all of these things are happening all the time, how are we going to cope? So we have to look at this for what it is, the reality of what we're facing, and try our best to quantify the risk. So this particular road in this particular town, how likely is it to flood? And if it floods, if it washes out, who won't be able to get where? And how big of a deal is that? And if that's a really big deal, then we should probably either try to prevent that from happening and or have a plan, an emergency response plan for how we're going to deal with these events. So the vulnerability assessment is about measuring these risks as much as we can so that we can manage them and be prepared.